Alex, how can you make content when you're sick, noob? Why didn't you prepare for this? Even think that you're good? I double dog dare you. Whoa, okay. So yeah, just to give a little bit of context to what's about to happen, and get off that scary note, I guess. I was kind of playing around with a friend a little bit. We chat a lot, me and her, because I hook with ladies all the time. Anyway, we were talking while I was sick. She was cheering me up, and I happened to send her some clips of when I was really, really sick. And as you can see on the screen right there, yes, she may or may not have asked me to do something for her. So here, this video is 100% dedicated to this girl right here. Unfortunately, in the picture, you actually can't see that it says super cool anime girl. Yeah, something like that. It kind of clips off at the end there, which I was actually. I don't think you can understand my disappointment when I found that out. But anyway, guys, yeah, this is mainly for her, so I kind of don't really care if y'all enjoy it or not. But if y'all do, great. Maybe I can make another one when my voice gets better. It, who knows? Anyway, guys, hope y'all enjoy, and I will see you all in the next video, I guess. Anas, Dosho, and Trepler. Part 1, 3 Books of Poetry. Once, below an eternity, there were 3 books, and their names were Anas, Dosho, and Trepler, respectively. They were great friends, as they were part of a set, and besides that, stuck together on a library shelf. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, one of them was chucked out of the library, and the other 2 would mourn and mope around without their friend until the 3rd book was returned. "We are growing so old on this shelf," Ines sighed one day to his 2 companions. "True," Dosho agreed, rustling her pages a little. "But we are together and can talk to each other about our contents, our authors, and our neighbors." All 3 of the books glanced dubiously at the tome next to them. Blue Traces of Shoelaces, and Other Poems by Frank Lee Ernest. "Well," Dosho added, "some books are more interesting than others." Trepler was the most thoughtful of the 3, considered these things. "I think," he said slowly, "I think that Ines is right. Sometimes it is nice to explore and to see the world. But the only reason it is nice is because you know you have a home to go to at the end of your journey. Like Dosho said, we can't talk, and I would rather talk with you 2 and grow dusty and yellow than traverse the whole world and be alone." The other 2 books nodded in mute agreement, and went on with their favorite discussion: Chaucer, Wordsworth, or Longfellow. "Of course, Chaucer is the most important poet," Anna said authoritatively. "He was really the first, you know, and without him your beloved Wordsworths and Longfellows would be hard put to think of much to say. Besides that, his way of spinning a story is like a skillful spider, is both admirable and extraordinary." "Oh, really, Annas," Trepler reproved. "Longfellow was obviously superior. Take, for instance, his method of subtle repetition, as in his hymn to the night, and the arrow in the song. He uses the same words and phrases, but does it so naturally. You know it must be done only that way. Also, his rhymes, interspersed with more intricate parallel syllables. Ah, what a master of the language was Longfellow." "But," Dosho put in, "but Wordsworth was the genuine poet, and saw the beauty in everyday occurrence, and glory in things taken for granted, and never lost the wonder of it all, like in his daffodils. Truly, losing wonder for common things, which are actually wonderful, is always the forerunner of the decline of society. In the words of the worthy Gilbert Keith Chesterton, man does not cherish for lack of wonders, he perishes for lack of wonder." Chaucer, though, Annis would rejoin, and then they would go on in the merriest, friendliest arguments on their literary contents. Of course, nobody was ever convinced of anything, but the books never let their spine get in a wrinkle about that. One day, though, the library held a book sale. The librarian came and plucked the 3 poetry books off of the shelf. "Oh dear," Anna said to the others, "I hope we are not sold and perhaps separated." "I thought you wanted to see the world," Dosho said. It would have been a truly mean thing to bring back his own words back on his head, if she had said them in a cold ink, and not because she was merely scared, which she was. But really, why don't they sell old shoelaces? Trepler said nothing. He was too busy wrestling with fear at the very thought of losing his 2 friends. He, as he had said, found that he did not want to travel anywhere without them. The 3 books sat together, huddled near each other for comfort. Slowly, the hours passed, and many books, some quite shockingly near them, were picked up and bought. But the day was over, and they were still together. "Oh, we are not bought," Dosho cried happily. "Don't get too excited," Trepler said. "The morrow may yet bring sorrow." The day dawned, and once again the poetry books were laid out on the table. Once a little girl snatched an ass and ran up to her mother. Dosho and Trepler almost fainted with devastation, but the girl's mother reproved her sharply, saying, "No, you don't want this. Go put it back where you found it." So Anas was safe and sound, but a little troubled at the mother's words. Why shouldn't a little girl read me, he wondered sadly. I would enlighten her, and teach her Chaucer, and she could muse beside the well, till the rain on the unraked cover fell. The day wore on achingly slowly. "I think we can begin to hope now," Dosho said. "We only have an hour left, and then we're free." But it was not to be. A young man came, saw the books, and gasped in delight. He eagerly picked up the 3 books, and the tomes in question, judged that even if they were bought, perhaps they would be bought together after all, and maybe travel in the bargain. The young man thought, then slowly put them down and pulled out his wallet. He counted and found he only had $4. He put down the other books that he had carried and added up their cost. "Ah, I can only get one," he said in anguish. He looked over his selection again, and ruefully decided he couldn't go without any of his other previous choices. The 3 books held their breath, which, it must be admitted, wasn't very hard, as he flipped through each of them in turn. When he came to Trepler, he muttered, "Tennyson, Longfellow, MacDonald, and Rossetti? That settles it." Then he firmly, if regretfully, put down Anas and Dosho. He checked out, buying Trepler and his other purchases, leaving the bereft trio in shocked sadness. Part 2. Trepler's Story. Needless to say, Trepler was shocked that he had been bought, and his friends had remained behind. He was carried in the young man's arms with 3 other books. One of them, a thesaurus, cried out to a dictionary as they passed the reference section. "Don't worry, honey. I'll find, recover, return to you somehow." Another booklet of quotations cackled maniacally to herself. The 4th and final book, a sober, large historical atlas, did not react to anything. Trepler cried to himself all the way to the young man's home. Then he regretted not peeking out the windows so he could at least see where he was going. It wouldn't have done much good anyway. Most books are not blessed with organs of transportation, and he could not very well get back to Anas and Dosho without aid. But when the young man brought him into his house, Trepler gazed around in awe. It was so vastly different from the library. There were no shelves at all, and much less books, and clutter was strewn everywhere. Trepler had been in homes before, of course, when he was checked out, but they were never bookless, or so messy. A small, shrieking child ran through the room, and the young man carried his new possessions upstairs. In his bedroom, the young man took out a pencil and methodically wrote his name in the thesaurus. "Rudy Stanford," the thesaurus said. "A pleasure, delight, joy indeed." Rudy then hastily scrawled the name in the quotations pamphlet. Aha, she laughed. It tickles. Stop. Stop. Rudy obeyed, followed the same procedure in the atlas, who did not react, and looked thoughtfully at Trepler. He opened his front cover, and Trepler prepared himself for the pencil. Oh, I can't, Rudy said to himself. You're too fine a book. I can't claim you. To Trepler's surprise, Rudy hid him under his bed, while the other books went to various spots in his shelves. Trepler could hear them meeting their new neighbors, and asking their names, and laughing. You're a mystery novel? He heard the thesaurus asked. Thriller, horror, suspense, wonderful, quite. But why am I under here? Trepler asked himself. I may be fresh from a library, but I've been checked out before, and I know this is not how most people treat books. Then Trepler's life fell into a pattern. Every morning, Rudy would open him and read a poem or two with relish, then close him and put him gently back under the bed. Next, when Rudy went to school, Trepler listened lonesomely to the conversations of the other books, so far away, on the shelf. Sometimes Trepler cried because he felt sorry for himself, as at least Ines and Dosho had each other, while he had no one. But he was comforted, remembering the good times they had, and considering the poems and thoughts within himself. He often wished he could have made a proper goodbye to his friends, something Dosho would like, by Brian. Fare thee well, and if forever, still forever, fare thee well, he would sigh most heartbreakingly. Then one day, while Rudy was reading him, Trepler heard a loud stomping. Now, Trepler had been long enough in this house to know what that meant. Somebody was about to get it from father. It was usually one of the smaller children, but sometimes it was Rudy himself. Trepler often had to catch, in his broad pages, the tears of his owner as Rudy tried to comfort the pain of a harsh parent with the sentiment of a poet. This time it appeared Rudy was about to get it, for he quickly stowed Trepler back under his bed and dropped himself out of his window. Rudy's father came in, loudly proclaiming what terrific things would happen to Rudy when he was caught, and a few naughty words Trepler was shocked to hear. He thought those sort of words were only in bad books, maybe dictionaries. Rudy's father thundered around his son's room for a while, yanking open the closet in search for his progeny. Then he looked under the bed. He did not find Rudy, but he sure found Trepler. He pulled him out, opened him, saw the lovely poetic words, and threw him angrily out into the hallway. Trepler's spine was injured, but he was more shocked than anything. He had vaguely hoped that the beautiful lines would soothe the angered man, but he did not account for the brutal ignorance of rage. Rudy's mother wearily picked Trepler up. Her husband yelled, "Get that book out of here, filling my boy's head with silly, sissy ideas." She meekly obeyed, and soon Trepler found himself on the shelf of a thrift store. At least I'm back where I should be, on a shelf, he thought. But I wish I knew what happened to Rudy. He seemed a decent sort, poor boy. Trepler also wished he had better neighbors. Some ignorant worker at the thrift store had foolishly put him in between a few teen romance novels. All those books did was chatter and giggle all not long about the most insipid and puerile things. Trepler was greatly relieved when a woman purchased him. He was weary of travel, but glad to be away from those silly paperbacks. He had given up on ever seeing his friends again, and only wished that he might have a peaceful life, where he may be appreciated and used. He hoped that he may have that with this woman. "Fletcher, look what I found," she said to a bearded man. "I think we can use this, can't we? For decoration and filling up our shelf?" The one called Fletcher looked Trepler over. "I think it'll work, Cass. Spine's a little broken, though." "Yeah, but the book itself's good." So the couple proudly placed Trepler on their sparsely decorated shelf in the living room. They never opened him, not even once, and Trepler sighed. "Well, I won't get used, but they do appreciate my fine cover." It must be admitted here that Trepler was quite vain of his hard cover. And the neighbors on the shelf weren't too bad. There was a chemistry book, which could be interesting at times, but dry at others. Also a few history books, and a law textbook. But they were at least more thoughtful companions than the romance novels. They even listened attentively when he told them about his past experiences. That reminds me of when General Grant was losing favor with the North, a history textbook named Trionic began proudly. When Trepler was done retelling his tale, he was cut off by Valence, the chemistry book. "Oh, hush up," he said, not unkindly. "No one cares about old Ulysses but you. And besides, Trepler's more like a wandering noble gas. Maybe krypton or helium." Well, or Odysseus and his travels. Trionic was not to be stopped that easily. Besides, he was rather fond of Grant, and knew that Ulysses and Odysseus were actually only different versions of the same name. So Trepler did not mind this place very much at all, although it seemed that more and more children kept coming, and some of them were so destructive he feared lest they should mutilate him. But he remained intact, although his spine was still injured from Rudy's father. One day Cassie, the woman, put all the books in a box. "Oh dear," Blackberry, the law book, said, nervously shifting her leaves. "I wonder if we're going to the free market." The book sat in anticipation for a few days. "I don't think we're going to be sold, Trepler said finally. "Maybe they just wanted us in a box. We'll deal with it. After all, some days must be dark and dreary. Were they to sell us, they would have put us out by now." Then they were jostled around in the box for quite some time. They could hear that they were in a car, and the journey was the longest any of the books had been on. Finally, they were carried again, dropped heavily on the ground, and put back on a different shelf by a few kids. "Oh dear," Blackberry said again. "There must have made a concord of understanding and intention with another party." "You mean a pact," Trionic suggested. "Maybe a treaty?" "She means covalent bonding," Valence corrected. "I think she just means an agreement," Trepler said quietly. The others stared at him. "I mean, the vine clings to the moldering wall," he corrected himself quickly. "Anyway," he continued, "I guess we haven't been sold, since it was Cassie's kids who put us back on the shelf, and not somebody we don't know." "But, then, where are we?" Blackberry asked. "I suppose the notion of being sold was a false representation of a matter of fact, but then, it is still not disclosed to me where we are." "It smells kind of funny," Trionic said, wrinkling his spine. "Probably too much moisture in the air," Valence said. "Unwanted organic substances must have found their way in and are growing here." "A felony," Blackberry muttered, and she was right. But the new home wasn't much different from the old one, as the same people were there. The books were in a more open location, and got to see more of what happened. That was the realest change. There were a lot of children, all screaming, Trepler remembered, like Rudy's siblings did. But these children were cleaner, and for the most part much happier. No one ever read the Watchful books, although once or twice some human flipped through Blackberry just for fun. But that was not minded too much. It was rather like home, back at the library, although without Annis Doplo. Trepler still missed them greatly, and cried sometimes, but held no hope for ever seeing them again. A change came one day, when a bored-looking girl perused the shelf. She didn't live at the home, and was just visiting, but seemed to have been neglected. When her eyes lit on Trepler, they brightened, and she slid them off the shelf. "She must have read me for at least 30 minutes, Trepler told the others later, "and she laughed out loud sometimes, showed a few lines to other people. I hadn't been read in ages. My spine felt so good to be stretched." Eventually, the girl put Trepler back, but he heard Cassie saying one day soon after, in reference to Trepler, "Since no one ever reads that book, and Kiwi liked it, why don't we give it to her?" "Oh no," he thought, "I don't want to change hands again. But still, it would be nice to be read, and it seems my road leads me forth." So Trepler switched homes once more. This time, the girl pulled out some glue and fixed his spine. "It's not as good as it once was," he said to himself, "but it's the best it's been in a while." Kiwi put him up on a high shelf, and to Trepler's delight, there were many other poetry books up there, including one about Longfellow. "Oh, it's so nice to find someone else who appreciates the masters," Trepler cried. "Yes, I know," the Longfellow book, more commonly referred to as Crawford, replied. "These other books up here, well, some of them are full of silly poems. Some prefer Yeats or Frost. and one actually declares Cummings is the best. Crawford sighed and shook his cover sadly. Poor ignorant things. But now that you're here, in addition to our friendly arguments, I have an educated conversation with someone who agrees. And so, although Kiwi didn't quite read him as much as he would have liked, Trepler found this home to be quite pleasant. His neighbors were well-spoken and intelligent, and he shared many a laugh and opinionated discussion with them. Also, if he called loud enough, he could converse with a jolly coin trick book a shelf below him. And the poetry books listened when Trepler told them about his two lost friends. In fact, a book containing many Wordsworth's poems wept most pitifully over the loss of Dosho. But Trepler had made up his mind to seal over his wound, and he just remembered them fondly, and at his lowest melancholy. And he grew increasingly dusty, jolly, and yellow, happy up on the poetry shelf. Part 3. Anas and Dosho's Story. Now we must return to the fate of our other two friends, Anas and Dosho. As Trepler was being taken away, Anas cried, "Dosho, remember that boy! We'll find him again and get Trepler back." "Anas, we can't move," Dosho pointed out sadly. He paid her no mind. "Curly hair, freckles, skinny, yellow shirt," he said. "Remember that, Dosho." "I will," she sighed, crying a little, "but I don't think it'll do much good. Besides, the humans change their shirts most days, so remembering this won't be very helpful. But what else can we do?" Dosho sighed. "I don't know. We'll probably never find Trepler, but at least, we have each other to understand. He's all alone, but not even in Innisfree did he want to leave us." Then Anas and Dosho were confined to a storage room in the library, so they could be put up for sale again next year. At first they were quite sad and mopey with their loss, but they saw that other books had lost many of their friends, and, coming to grips with the idea of losing Trepler, they tried to comfort other sad tomes near them. "My brother's gone," one would cry, and Dosho would curl her pages around it and soothe the story book back to sleep. "My wife was so fragile," a tattered yellow book wailed. "I don't know if she'll survive." And Anas would recount some wonderful poems to him until all the books that had lost someone were comforted. Anas and Dosho were rather driven out of their covers to meet others, but the books were in close quarters, and they shared many good times with their new friends. They never forgot Trepler exactly, but he kind of moved to the back of their minds, although he was always at least there. They hoped earnestly for the day they might say to him, as Shakespeare did, "How like a winter has my absence been from thee." For several more years they were put out when the library had its book sale. But no one seemed interested in 2 volumes of a 3-volume poetry set. Most, in fact, poetry books were overlooked, and all Anas and Dosho hoped for anymore was not to be separated. For years they grew steadily older and yellower, remembering Trepler, making new friends, losing old ones, and arguing about poetry. The library held another book sale. "Let's hope," Anas said. Dosho nodded. Day 1 dawned, and they were laid out neatly. At one point, Anas hissed, "Dosho! See him? Curly hair, freckles, skinny. He's here. We just have to get him to buy us." But the boy passed on morosely. "Are you sure it was the same kid?" Dosho asked uncertainly. "I thought so," Anas said, "but I guess I'm not sure. Drat!" Several other customers thumbed through them, but they were not purchased, and the 2 friends were safe. Day 2 came, and they waited impatiently while a girl carefully looked through the poetry titles. She reached them and gasped happily. "Hunter, look!" she cried, and to Anas and Dosho's horror, she picked them up and waved them in the air. A boy came over and saw the 2 poetry tomes. "Hey," he said, "those are nice copies. They look like the ones Eric got." "I know," the girl replied. "I'm getting them." No, Dosho thought, terrified. Even if Trepler manages to get back here, he would be so hopeful, thinking he would find us, and we would be gone. He would have no idea. The tragedy of the idea struck her so sharply she wept immediately. "Oh, I do not think I know the bliss of solitude. I don't want to leave. I am so sick of the world's noise and strife." with these hysterical and contradictory statements, and one of them a rejection of her favorite poet, Dosho fell into a brown study. Neither Anaso nor Dosho had the heart to talk to the other books on the ride home. Then again, none of the other purchases seemed very talkative either. If only Anas sighed, well, we shall have to make the best of it. Cheer up, old chap. Think of the beauty and brightness of life, he said encouragingly to Dosho. We'll figure this out. Part 4. The End. Anas and Dosho were at the bottom of the box when the girl started unpacking. She worked quickly and slid books into their places at a rapid pace. She came to the depressed volumes that are the focus of our story. She laughed a little to herself, just for the pleasure of it apparently. For our friends, the books certainly saw nothing very humorous. She wrote her last name in the front cover with a pencil. Kolyetsenev, Dosho said. Now I'm branded. Oh, Polsky. We'll go with Polsky. How about that? Polsky, Dosho said. She sighed. Now I'm branded. And Ass underwent similar treatment, and the two of them were thumped onto a high shelf. I think I'm going through one of my last voice changes. They were too low in spirits to look around them. The stacks of paperbacks next to them were excitedly discussing the new arrivals. Ooh, a phantom toll booth, one of them grinned, peering down on the girl. And another dictionary. I myself am interested in our new friends, the thick one said, glancing happily over to Anas and Dosho. The book next to Dosho turned to her and screamed. Dosho was so stunned at this response that she nearly fell off the shelf. But she caught herself, and looked at the hardcover who caused her so much surprise. Why, Trepler, she gasped with the most acute shock. What, Trepler here? Anas cried, wildly looking everywhere but in the correct spot. Yes, it's Trepler, your old friend, that happy book announced in the deepest throes of ecstasy. And it's Dosho and Anas, my dear old fellow volumes. The other poetry books, for this was, of course, the poetry shelf in Kiwi's room, welcomed the newcomers most graciously and cheerfully, and kindly retreated to allow Trepler the enjoyment of his prodigal companions on his own. Oh, fabulous day, Trepler, Anas said. I can hardly believe it's you. What about the boy? What happened? I'll tell you all about it, Trepler promised. Ahem. But for now, let's enjoy a moment of reconciliation. What about this girl? Dosho asked. She put you all the way up here. Is she nice? Oh, she's fine, Trepler answered. Doesn't read us as often as we could wish, and she's a little prideful about her books. You know, sometimes treating us more like trophies, rather than an avenue for an offer to express himself. But she takes care of us, and, after all, she got us back together, so she can't be too bad. And your poor cover, Dosho continued, examining it. It got all damaged, and you're so yellow. Am I really? Trepler asked worriedly. Well, as for my cover, that was kind of an accident. All of us must fade, like Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look to my, books and despair. Oh, crap. I messed up the Civ 4 reference, but, there it is. Yeah, that's the one. That's nice. Glad we could, squeeze that in here. I don't know why she didn't put that in there when she wrote this story. I don't know. The girl, Kiwi, oh, fiddlesticks. The girl, Kiwi's her name, you know, fixed me up as fast as she could. Or as best, you know, whichever, where I could just choose from the story, or make up my own, I guess. Oh, I wish you could know the devotion I had to something afar from the sphere of my sorrow. Oh, stop it, Trepler, Dosho said. You're quoting Shelley. Twice in 3 sentences, just to please me, I know it. You know, I knew a Shelley once. We might be getting a little off topic from this audiobook, though. Is this really even considered an audiobook? No, I'm sorry, we're so close. Well, maybe just a little, Trepler admitted. But really, though, it is rare for emotions to submit themselves to being described by words, and I can honestly say that my happiness at seeing you two again is most certainly not cooperating. That is why I used poetry. It was then that the other poetry books, at the instigation of Trepler's friend Crawford, broke into song. It was in honor of the restoration of the three-volume set, and their song went something like this. The world's an inn, and I her guest. I eat, I drink, I take my rest. Shall I comfort, travel sore and weak? Of labor you shall find the sum. Will there be beds for me and all who seek? Yea, beds for all who come. So it's home again, poetry for me. My heart is turning home again, and there I long to be. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Well, thank you all for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and I will see you all in the next video. Classified out. Well, for those of you who made it to the end of the video, big thanks. And, oh man, just a couple little quick things here. Huge thanks to Kiwi, by the way, who was with me through the end of my sickness there. Obviously, this video was inspired by her. Actually, it was because she found my voice hilarious. I sent her a couple of, personal messages, basically, with some of my other voices that I had mentioned, that sounded a little weird. But anyway, she heard it, basically the one that sounded like the one you heard in the audiobook, and said, hey, you should use that. So I did. But anyway, here's some bonus clips-ish, kind of some of the times that I messed up that I kind of got a little kick out of. Accompanied, of course, by a picture that I just had to include when I found it, because honestly, the resemblance is just uncanny, Rudy obeyed, followed the same procedure in the Atlas, who did not oh dear. This time, it appeared Rudy was about to get it. The poetry books listened emphatically. Empathetic. The poetry books listened when curly. Oh dear. And Ash and Doso were at the bottom of the box when the girl started unpacking. She worked quickly and slid the books. What? The books. Oh dear. And slid books into their places at a rapid pace. Then she came to the depressed volumes that are the focus of our story. She laughed a little to herself, just for the pleasure of it. Apparently, for when the books, for our friend, oh my gosh, I can't. This last chapter, guys. Oh, let's try this again.